Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you all for joining us today in this panel discussion in celebration of Women's History Month hosted by SheSTEM and South Texas Frown Upside Down. We are incredibly honored to have with us four inspiring women leaders who have made significant contributions to our community. Women's History Month is a time to recognize and celebrate the achievements of women throughout history and
Recording
today.
in progress.
Our panelists have broken barriers and paved the way for others, and we're excited to hear their insights and stories. Let's get started by hearing from each of our panelists about their journey and experiences. Thank you once again for being here. Before we start the panel discussion, I would like to ask our panelists to tell us a little bit about themselves. We could start with Ms. Sarah Hammond, then Ms. Leah Wise, Ms. Monica Urena, and then Ms. Chapa.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, especially with these wonderful women, some of whom are going to be awarded tonight. We're super excited for that. My name is Sarah Hammond, and I am the current owner of Atlas Electrical, Air Conditioning, Refrigeration, and Plumbing Services Incorporated. We've been in business now 42 years. I started when I was 0. No, I'm just joking. But seriously, I also own Intentionally Bridget, Alton Xplex, and a Hummingbird trailer park for Winter Texans. I'm super excited to be involved in the community. My passion is to serve, and that's why I'm here today, just to support and to give service where I can and where I'm wanted to be at. So thank you for having me here.
Okay, am I next?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Wise. I am an attorney. I specialize in personal injury. I'm born and raised in the Rio Grande Valley. I now live in Edinburgh, but I practice all over the entire state, and I currently represent clients in every major city in Texas. I also have a clothing line called Crash Gal Couture, which I'm wearing right now. I also invest in real estate. I recently purchased an old gentleman's club called Exoticas, transformed it, and moving into it in a few days, hopefully. And I also started a nonprofit foundation called Wise Women Foundation, and our mission is to empower and support minority women. So sort of like Sarah, I'm very passionate about serving, helping, empowering young women. And I also am the co-host of a podcast with Sarah Hammond called What You Don't See. Y'all should definitely check us out on YouTube. We cover a wide range of women's issues. We talk about things that are considered taboo or have a lot of stigma attached to them, but things that we think that women really need to be speaking more about and that young girls should be hearing about. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Monica Urena. I'm a licensed professional counselor for the state of Texas and also for the state of Arizona. Basically, my specialty is trauma. I deal with any severe cases when it comes to all the way from human trafficking to sexual assault. I'm part of so many associations when it comes to my mission of advocating for better mental health and resources overall in the state of Texas and also Arizona. One of the biggest projects we're working is to have a multicultural kind of diversity licenses where any counselor in any state can assist clients from other states. So we're working really close with all the mental health boards across every state to make sure, you know, for the future generations of counselors to come in for mental health will be able to do that. Due to a lot of areas, including the RGV, where I'm originally from. Basically, it's a very area that needs a lot of help, and there's not a lot of counselors enough to assist or resources in that sense. So we're trying to incorporate as many resources and counselors that are better assist populations, especially on the Hispanic side, you know, when it comes to Spanish speaking. I'm also very excited and advocating for any entrepreneurs associations in the area of Texas, but also in the state of Arizona. Back in Texas, I was part of a lot of female associations for entrepreneurs. In the state of Arizona, I'm currently part of an association called Influential Women of Arizona, which is basically bringing all the resources into one community for nonprofit services that will incorporate many services for Native American, but also for low socioeconomic areas.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Irma Chapa, and I am currently the Senior Vice President of Marketing for Lone Star National Bank. I spent my career in public affairs, communications, and have worked at Channel 4 early on. That was my first job in the Rio Grande Valley, then moved on to Valley Baptist Health System, where I oversaw corporate communications, and from there, went to Entravision Communications and started the 9 o'clock newscast way before you guys were born, but that's okay. You can still watch now. And then moved to the U.S. Border Patrol. At the U.S. Border Patrol, I learned vast information from everything that has to do with immigration to the technology that's used in the field, and was probably one of the most exciting times in my life to work for that agency that also took me to Washington, D.C. And so it's time treasured for myself and for all the folks that I got to meet. The folks that we call, they're non-gun toters, those are called civilians in the government agencies. And so I was a civilian. A lot of the jobs that are being cut today by the federal government that I feel are most efficient, some of them are being taken away. And so I'm watching now at everything that's happening across the nation. I'm thinking, wow, would my job have been affected? But God will always lead you to your next venture. And God led me to this job. One night, I was on LinkedIn and I saw that Lone Star had an opportunity. And I applied, not thinking that anything was going to happen. A few months later, I interviewed, and here I find myself as a senior vice president and just happy as a clam and learning so much about the finance world. There's more to banking than meets the eye. And I'm so happy to represent this local community-owned bank that has 33 locations here in the Valley and in San Antonio. So that's a little bit about me personally. I have 2 young boys that are U.S. Marines living in Oceanside, California. I got lucky. They both got stationed at the same place, and I'm going to see them tomorrow. So this is a wonderful way for me to spend my day before I head out on vacation. Thanks for inviting me, Sarah.
Do any of you guys have anything to add? No? Okay. So what inspired you to pursue leadership in your field? And we can go in the same order that you went in before.
Well, it's a family-owned business. That's why it's been in business 42 years. My parents started it. My parents were migrant workers. They were high school sweethearts, se la robó, which means my dad basically took her. And they eloped and they got married, and they worked in the fields for many years. And I was born, they were still working in the fields, and my dad was working. He signed up for the Air Force because he wanted to give our family a better job, a better life. And in the Air Force, he learned the trades. My family moved back home and they started the company. I've been working in the business since I was like 7, answering phones, helping file stuff. We were able to transition out of the house and move into an office at an actual building. We bought property. So I did not want to do this. This was not like what I thought I was going to do. As a matter of fact, I would cry when I was young, telling my father, take me to the field, because they would come home all dirty and sweaty, but it looked like fun, right? And I was bored at home, and I was washing dishes and cooking and cleaning with my mom and answering phones, and I didn't want to be doing that. And so my dad would say, este trabajo no es para ti. This is not a place for a female. You need to stay at home and help your mom at home. Well, look at me now, Dad. No, seriously. So it kind of like fell into my hands. My parents went through a transition. They were not sure they were going to close the company. I had been working for attorneys, doing a lot of back-end work in bankruptcy law and reconstruction and rehabilitation for companies. And I decided to apply that to my dad's company, come on board, and I fell in love with it. One of the reasons I fell in love with it again was because it allowed me to get into the community, and that gave me a passion to continue with this business so that we could give back to our wonderful area of the Rio Grande Valley. Thank you.
So sort of like Sarah, I didn't really know where I was going to end up or what I was going to end up doing. Even when I graduated from college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to go to law school. I didn't know if I wanted to go into journalism or something completely different. So it wasn't until I worked at the Capitol during the legislative session that I decided I wanted to become an attorney, because I loved the way the legislators were able to advocate for their constituents, and I wanted to be an advocate as well. So without having to run for office, I decided the best way to be an advocate is to become an attorney. So I went to law school and took the bar exam. And then I was sort of at another crossroads, had no idea if I wanted to apply for a job at a law firm or go into nonprofit work or something else. And I pretty much knew myself by then. At this point, I was 26. I knew that I eventually wanted to be self-employed and to really just have that freedom to create my own schedule, be able to take days off if I need to, not really have to answer to anybody, and just the freedom of being an entrepreneur and being a business owner. And so I decided that that was the best time to do it, because I wasn't married. I didn't have any kids. I still don't have kids. But at that point, I was like, okay, now is the time to struggle, because I don't have anybody else to take care of except for myself. And so I decided to go for it. I started my law practice the day after I passed the bar exam. I would say that that is kind of a dumb thing to do. Thankfully, it ended up working out in my favor, though. Everything ended up working out for me, and it's the best decision I ever made. But when people ask me if they should open their own law practice straight out of law school, I usually say no, unless you want to really struggle for 3 or 4 years, which I did. I'm proud to say that I have since represented thousands of clients throughout the entire state, have won millions of dollars for them. In 2020, we secured the largest settlement in the state of Texas for that year. And I'm really happy with the path that I chose, but I think that the reason why I wanted to be self-employed and, to be the CEO of my own company was because I really, really value freedom, time, doing things on my own terms, not really having to answer to people, delegating. I really love marketing. And so I decided to take a shot, and it worked out. And so that's how I fell into the position that I am in now.
Well, for me, I was doing my internship during my undergrad, doing my bachelor's for psychology. And I was doing my internship hours at a domestic violence shelter. I was basically doing the intake process and gathering all the information for the victims or survivors in that case. And I realized that I wanted to do more. I realized that I didn't know how to respond to them. I didn't know how to give them comfort or do anything other than gather documentation and data in that sense. And that's where I was going to do my master's program. And I decided, you know what, it will be a good fit if I go into counseling and guidance and actually become an LPC. To provide counseling services, to give them comfort, to find resources, to network in the community, to be able to assist more. So that's basically how it got me involved in more resources and more community involvement, leadership positions when it comes to that. I became involved more in the specialty that I'm involved right now with human trafficking, child trafficking across the states. So I tend to move a lot for emergency services. for natural disasters, for emergency services, for any humanitarian crisis, basically. So you have to be in those leadership involvements. You know, sometimes I handle about 600 people under me. I deal with a lot of operations, you know, when it comes to different federal branches. So I have to understand that they're not coming from the same background as, you know, as different networks that I deal with. And I have to understand that their mentality is different. So being able to speak and understanding where they're coming from, but also understanding and advocating for my clients at the same time. You know, we understand the mission, the task is to do this, but we also need to show empathy and have that human side to make sure that, yes, we go and take out the survivors of human trafficking, but how we don't generalize the concept or traumatize them in a second term, to make sure we gather the data that they need, you know, to continue their case or, you know, finalize the case, but also understanding that we need to think as humans and have that empathy and compassion. So that's where I come in. I have to have those leadership roles in order for me to put my word and advocating for the clients and the survivors in any state, in any human, you know, scenario that I'm put in, when it comes to a lot of different scenarios, depending on the situation of the state, depending on the mission, depending on the situation that we're experiencing at that moment.
So I think for myself, as a young child, I wanted to be on the news. I had, you know, every night my parents were watching the news, and there was a lady, and we lived in Houston, and her name was Alexis South. And she'd come on, and she was really bubbly and pretty and just really, you know, just everything you would imagine about a weather lady back in the day, right? And I would walk around telling people the weather. You know, anybody who came over, I would tell them, you know, Alexis South says it's going to rain today, so you better have your raincoat. And my parents just thought it was funny, you know, that I'd grow out of it. But no, I just stayed committed. And as your career grows in a certain position that you finally find yourself in, you realize, okay, am I going to do this forever? Is this going to be my life? Or am I going to move on and do something that's going to be more fulfilling? And although that was my dream to become a weather person, and I did that, and a reporter, and I did that, you find yourself at a time where it's, okay, are you going to move to a bigger city? Are you going to go do this long term? Or is it time to have a family? Do I want, you know, those two little boys that I always dreamed of having, you know, and I actually manifested two boys, but I found myself in a community here in the Rio Grande Valley that was very loving. And I was learning so much about my culture because I didn't grow up here, and meeting so many great people that just, I landed jobs within the communications field. And every time I moved up, I was able to not only learn more, but be more for that agency. So as I moved on to the hospital level, I was a director, and one of, I think, two Hispanic directors at Valley Baptist at the time. Whereas now, I hope to God there's more. I'm sure there is. But from there, you know, diving back into news and sales, because at the time, one of my mentors, he's still around in this community, his name's Larry Saphir, and he's one of the vice presidents at DHR Health. He told me, you know, you really have to focus on what it is that's going to fulfill you, what you want to do in your life. So why don't we put you in sales, kid? So he taught me all about sales and marketing and advertising and pitching to people and creating commercials and learning more about, you know, this whole other world when social media was just starting to happen and take off. And so I think having mentors in your life is important as you continue to grow and you lead, but you also have to determine for yourself what it is that really is going to make you happy in your life. For me, moving on to the government was more for ease. I had those two little boys and I wanted an 8-to-5 job. But then what happens in our community? In 2014, our border is infiltrated with people from all over the world, coming and wanting to become, wanting to come to the United States. So then I found myself working again 12, 14-hour days and leaving my kids with a babysitter. And so it's tough. Life is never going to be easy. It's going to be challenging. And there's going to be times, like Miss Wise said, where, you go through these ups and downs of, did I make the right decision? Do I want to be a business owner and then, be broke for a little while, but then know that at the end, there's going to be a big payday and a reward. And thank God for that. But it doesn't always happen that way. I didn't want to take chances with my life like she did. And, she's, an inspiration because I see her billboards everywhere. I had dreams like maybe I will own my own business one day, but I didn't take that route. I took the more corporate route, which is great as well. What I've found now at 54, that the best thing that I can do for others is to teach them and mentor them. So what fulfills my heart now in this career in the corporate world is to see young people figuring out which direction they want to go in. And if it's in communications, I want to help them. I want to help them grow. I want to help you navigate where you want to be. So leadership for me is all about mentorship at my age. And I want to see you become successful. And so I think that each person, it's going to be a different answer depending on where they grew up, what they're doing now in their lives. But in the end, it's about wanting to see the future succeed the way we have.
That was very interesting to hear. I want to thank you all for your answers. I have another question. What challenges did you face as a woman in leadership, and how did you overcome them?
I guess that would be me first. We're going in the same order. Wow, challenges. Well, when you think about it, in my story, I said that my dad told me this was not a place for me, right? So one of the biggest challenges is when my dad asked me to step in as president of the organization, we were with some family friends that we had grown up with. And one of the gentlemen, he said, "You're going to give it to her? She doesn't know what she's doing." And so that's a massive challenge, was the conception that females did not belong in this industry. When I started and I took over as president and it became known, a lot of the warehouses in my area would make fun of my technicians when they would show up. They would say, "Trabajas para una vieja," you work for a female. I would have some technicians that would come in to apply, and when they found out that I was the boss or the president, they wouldn't come back. There was a lot of gender bias that I had to be strong enough to overcome. One of the biggest strengths was I had this one time when a gentleman called in and he said, "I don't want to speak to you. I want to speak to the man in charge." And I had to repeatedly keep my stance of what we were going to discuss. And he said, "There was an older man that I spoke to. Where is he?" And I said, "Oh, you mean my father?" And he's like, "That's the man I want to speak to, the one in charge." So I hung up with him and I called my father and I told my dad, "This gentleman wants to speak to you." And I told him the story and he said, "I'll talk to him." And we hung up, or he hung up, and he reached out to the man. And I sat there for like 10 minutes feeling really unsure of myself and very weak and vulnerable at that moment, because I thought my dad said he was going to call him. That's the response. I wanted something different. I wanted him to say, "No, get us on a three-way." I wanted something forceful, but that's not what my dad did. So for 10 minutes, I sat here thinking, maybe this is not my journey. This is not where I should be if I can't even get the support that I was expecting to get from my own father. Well, lo and behold, 11 minutes later, after I was wallowing in my own self-pity, the gentleman calls back and he asks for me. And he said to me, "Well, according to the gentleman I spoke to, you're the boss. So I guess we're going to have to settle this and figure this out." And I sat there after that conversation. I told myself, the biggest challenge is you and your mindset and expectation of what you think other people should say and do in the moment of your emotion. So that has really propelled me to learn about myself, learn my triggers, understand why things upset me, and then take my emotion out and solve the problem with the same integrity and passion and kindness and the values that I was grown up with. And to never have an expectation of somebody else, because you don't know what somebody else is thinking in their brain. And just because their reaction or their physical moment is not aligned with what you expect, it doesn't mean you have less value or that you don't have the strength to do what you know you are meant to do. And I'm meant to run this company. I love it and I'm here to stay. And so I learned a lot in that one moment, and I have many, many moments to share, but I'm going to let the other ladies take it from here. Thank you.
So the area of law that I chose is called personal injury. And I don't know if y'all are old enough to, remember or, still notice, but most of the personal injury attorneys on TV and billboards are all men. And so before I started practicing in 2016, there wasn't a single female personal injury attorney in South Texas who was specializing 100% in personal injury. There were no women on billboards. There were no women on TV. And so I was very intimidated by that because there were no women doing it and it was all men. It was the same men who yell on commercials, who they all look the same on the billboards. And so I decided that I wanted to be the first woman in South Texas to break into that industry. And so I did, and it was really, really tough because a lot of people didn't trust that women could excel in this area of law. A lot of clients, were hesitant to hire me because they thought maybe I wasn't, aggressive enough, or I wasn't, capable in the same way that a man is. And I still remember I was in court one morning and I was in the area where a bunch of lawyers hang out to talk to prosecutors. And the bailiff came up to me and said I needed to leave because the area that I was standing in was for lawyers only. So even the bailiff thought that I did not look enough like a lawyer to be in that area. And so that just, that was, not too long ago. I've only been practicing for 7-8 years. So there still is, like Sarah said, there still is a lot of gender bias and a lot of these misconceptions as to what a lawyer or a CEO should look like or what they should act like. And I have decided that being myself, being feminine, being girly is totally fine. And that doesn't take away from my professionalism whatsoever. It doesn't take away what I'm capable of. And so now my settlement numbers speak for themselves. My clients don't ever question me anymore. You see a lot more women lawyers on billboards. You see a lot more women lawyers on TV now, which is so amazing. We've made so much progress as female lawyers in the personal injury space. So I think that, sort of like Sarah said, it has a lot to do with you and your mindset and whether you're willing to overcome those periods of self-doubt, because it happens even as a man, even as a woman in a, predominantly women industry. It happens to everybody. It doesn't matter where you work, what you do. You have moments of self-doubt. You have moments of imposter syndrome. You have moments where you wonder whether you belong there. And so you really have to be able to be your own biggest cheerleader, push forward, realize that you are just as capable as anybody else, no matter whether you're a woman, you're a man, your skin color, none of that matters. You have done the hard work. You've put in the hard work to be where you are. And there is no reason why your gender or your skin color should make a difference.
For me, I have several experiences, but one that I can really recall, it was when I first started in my field. I was very blessed to have amazing opportunities at, when I was 21 to start my career. And somebody, believed on me and gave me an opportunity to become a supervisor when I was 22 years old, coming into my field. I started with one of the most difficult populations, which is substance abuse. Most of the people that work, when they're counselors, most of them are veterans. They have to be veterans. They have gone through their own recovery services, or they have more 5-8 years of experience. So when I became the supervisor for the first adolescent program, nonprofit in the area of, Cameron County during that time, I was faced by a lot of males stating that why will I listen to somebody so young that's a female that wants to be my supervisor if I'm moving to that program. And I remember during that time, I was having my first baby also, so I had to be in maternity leave. And in order to prove myself and to others that I could accomplish the grant and develop the program from scratch, after a week, I had to go back to work. I had a lot of Zoom calls during that time, and I had to go to work and receive the grant that we have work in order to get the money for the program. And we successfully did all the completion, but there was a lot of obstacles, in the sense of even on the staff understanding me that, yes, I'm 22 years old, give me a chance, you can learn things from me as I learn from you, and understanding. But that kind of opened up a lot of doors for me, now, 10 years later after that I was able to work in environments where 80% of the population that I work with when it comes to operations are males, and these are males that come from law enforcement background, federal branches, from a lot of agencies that are federal agents. And I'm able to speak to them to the same level that they speak to me, when it comes to, I understand what you're saying. I know what is your task. I know my task, but this is what needs to be done. And I'm able to sit on tables where people can actually understand me, listen to me, and say, you know what, yes, I may not have your level of experience because I wasn't born at that time, but I know what I'm speaking to, and I can handle my whole department if you let me know what is it that you need. Provide me the resources and I'll make it happen, If they say make magic, Monica, I'll make magic, but just give me the resources. And I'm able to understand them and talk to them in the sense that, yes, I'm a female, but also you need to understand that maybe that's a good reason to give me 2 more minutes, because maybe I have, a little bit more sympathy, emotions, empathy, and, anything that can be helpful to make sure we complete the task and nobody gets hurt, So that's basically, when it comes to many challenges in many settings, and seeing people that work with me and understanding that, yes, we're females, we're the 20% there, but that doesn't make us less. It makes us more powerful, and we have to be more together to make sure they listen to us when we have to be listened.
Ms. Chapa, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Yeah, everything good? I agree with that 100%. I think sometimes how we react to things as women can sometimes take us back. We just need to take a step in a positive direction and take a breath sometimes before we react to things. I don't know that it'll ever go away. Equal opportunities, pay gaps. I hope it does. And for those that, living in maybe bigger cities where you see some disparities of that nature, that not so much with small businesses, but with corporate America, I do hope that one day we see that everybody is making the same amount of money and having the same opportunities given to them. In the meantime, the only advice I have for that is that when you're in high level discussions or you face interruptions because you may be female, that you just always maintain your posture and your presence, and that'll give you so much more credibility in dealing in situations like that. I worked like Miss Urena in the federal government, and a majority of the meetings that I sat in, it was probably 90% men and 10% women, if that, on those days. And so I've seen it all. In the banking world, it's you know, it's a high number as well of men as opposed to women, maybe 70-30. I don't face today that type of inequality that I have seen in the past. Being a reporter, I didn't face any of that. People just want you to tell their stories, and they didn't care who was there to listen. They just wanted to tell somebody and to make a difference. And I watch those stories sometimes, even now on Channel 5, where, you know, they called our hotline and they took care of the water situation right away. And so I'll tell you, in situations like that, where you're just going to make a difference in some jobs, people are just going to be happy to see you no matter what you do. And in any job that you have, take care of it. That's what I will tell you. Be present, listen, always be ready to learn something that day. My dad always said, you never know who you're going to meet. That person could be your employer one day. So always be your best, look your best, and do your best. So that's the advice that I would give you about being a woman and being successful.
Was there a defining moment in your career that shaped who you are as a leader?
There were many defining moments. I think there's defining moments for me constantly, because I'm always trying to work on myself. One of the biggest things that I have learned is that if I don't change, that I don't improve me, then I will never bring the best foot forward. And so no matter what situation I'm in, I'm always trying to figure out if I'm triggered, if I'm doing the right thing, and if it's being positive. And am I doing whatever it is, whether it's a negative situation, what is the positive thing to do right? I gave a story earlier about situations and incidents that have happened to me. I've served on several boards. I do a lot in the community. All I can say is know yourself, learn about who and what makes you happy, and know your own worth. Be strategic, protect your energy. And whenever you lead, lead with purpose and don't lead with ego. There was one time when I led with my ego, and I learned that I had led with my ego because I got angry and I could not control my anger, and I shouted. And when you stop back and you look at yourself, nobody deserves to be shouted at. Nobody deserves to be talked down to, no matter what the situation is. That's leading an ego. That was a huge defining moment that I actually lost my control, and out of my frustration, it was a bad incident, but it was out of my frustration that they didn't pay attention to what they were doing, and now we have this huge, massive incident that I'm going to have to fix. I got angry and I led with anger. So the big thing that I can tell you is get out of ego, lead with purpose. Titles don't define you. It doesn't matter who you are. It's not okay to yell at anybody. We are all human. We all make mistakes. And when you remember that first, then you can be truly a leader for those that work underneath you, and those that you serve besides, and those that are above you. Nobody deserves to be talked down to. Nobody. Thank you.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Was there a defining moment in your career that shaped who you are as a leader?
I can't really think of like one single defining moment, sort of like what Sarah said. There's so many. And I think the message that I want to convey is that even after 7-8 years of doing this, and for Sarah, after however many years she's been doing what she's doing, and both of the other women on here, I'm sure that they're still learning every single day. They're still making mistakes. They're still having those defining moments. I for sure still am. I would say that being an employer and having employees has created a lot of different defining moments for me, and has led to a lot of self-discovery. because as an employer, you don't just worry about yourself, you're worried about making sure everybody is fulfilled in their job and what they're doing, you know, that they're getting paid fairly, that they have health insurance, that they have all, you know, this wide range of benefits, that they can take care of their families, and that it's no longer just about you. There's a ton of responsibility that comes with being an employer, managing different personalities, making sure your staff is getting along, making sure there's not that one toxic employee that's ruining it for everybody else, hiring, firing. I've had to fire employees. That was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. And you would think that as a lawyer, it wouldn't be very difficult, but it really is it really was a defining moment for me personally, because I realized that I was strong because I needed to do that and I did not want to do it. And number two, that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to, you know, make sure that my other employees are in a positive working environment, that there aren't toxic individuals that are sucking the life out of everybody around them. So, you know, managing all of those emotions, managing personalities, being an employer really is one of the hardest things about my everyday life. I would say that that is like, I'd rather go to court. I'd rather fight with lawyers. I'd rather do public speaking, because being an employer and having to, you know, make sure that everybody's happy and that everybody is, you know, taking care of their mental health and everybody's getting their work product done. And it really is one of the hardest things about what I do. And I think that that's something that gets looked over when entrepreneurs give speeches, is how challenging it is to be an employer and manage employees and be the HR person. I don't have an HR department. I'm the HR person. So eventually I would like to get there. Right now I have a staff of a little over 10 people. And so we're growing very quickly. And eventually I would like to have a full C-suite, chief financial officer, chief HR officer. But right now I'm really like deep in the trenches as far as being an employer and a manager. And so if anybody on here wants to be an employer, just be ready for that. And remember, kind of like Sarah said, you have to take the emotion out of it. You really do. You have to take the emotion and the ego out of it, because nothing about it is personal. It really is just managing expectations, managing personalities, making sure people are, you know, doing their job, making sure that they're happy. That's something that's really important to me. One of my worst nightmares is the thought of one of my employees driving to work hating their life. Like the thought of somebody driving to work hating their life working for me is like, no, like how could I have an employee like that? Is it them? Is it me? What needs to change? I think I'm just like rambling and like trauma dumping on all of you. But basically what I'm trying to say is that I want to reiterate that you're taking the emotion out of it, taking your ego out of things, because there's going to be times in your career where you let your ego take over, you let your emotions take over. And so it really is important to like take a step back, remove the emotions from the situation, and deal with it in a rational and reasonable way.
In my case, I have experienced several situations, you know, that have been significant. But I think one of the most recent, and I guess a big moment of understanding that things can be changed and be flexible and things can change within 5 minutes. It was during our COVID operations, you know. My background usually is clinical departments, handling situations, but during that time, you know, our departments became more 95% medical, and then the 5% to support the patients, but also support the whole staff, you know. We had a lot of new staff that have never done emergency services in not hospital settings. So basically we were in a conference, in a convention center. It was not a hospital setting. And a lot of people couldn't go back home. That was another thing. They had to work long hours due to understanding the situation and us getting the information within 5 minutes, and distribute everybody that was on the floor in the hot zones. And this is what's going to be done. Understanding that, yes, we were doing the administration, the operation sides, but also understanding that they have a human side, the doctors, the nurses, all the staff that do those operations. We're losing people, we're losing family members, we're not able to see the children for a couple of months, even 2 years, because that operation went over about 2.5 years. And understanding that in order for us to protect our families and everything around us, we couldn't go back home like we usually do with rotations. So that made me understand that there was always going to be obstacles, but the most important thing is that I was there for them, that whenever they needed to talk to somebody, they will be able to step aside and be, you know what, I know you're going through a difficult situation, but you have about 200 staff that are waiting for a response from your doctor, from the nurse, or from the, whoever was in the leadership positions, and they need you back on the field. They need you back in the hot zone. Understanding that emotion have to be put aside when it comes to administration side, but the emotion has to be there present in order to support your staff, in order for them to continue doing their jobs. Understanding that my role became a lot of roles within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and understanding that my emotions have to be put aside and be like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. I understand you don't understand the administrative side of what needs to be done, but this is what we're going to be doing, because this is what the patients and the environment or the patients that we're receiving today need from us. So I think that was a very difficult moment for a lot of people, but it was a very challenging and growing personally in many areas of administration, operations, and clinical also in that sense. And understanding that things can go very well for one day when it comes to certain policies and procedures, and then the following day it doesn't. You change everything. And I think one of the things that, understanding is always being flexible. It doesn't matter your career, your gender, ethnicity, anything like that. We're not prepared for any scenarios that comes to us, but we have to be flexible and understanding our staff, ourselves, and always have that personal growth to maintain the leadership role that you have in that place.
So for me, and I'll keep it short, I think one of the most defining moments for me in my career was 9/11 and covering the news. You went from, an average day in the RGV to something catastrophic, clarity, comfort, bringing some sense of, this horrific tragedy, and bringing critical information to the viewers. And it's kind of ironic telling you that, this question for me today from you guys, because I just remembered that when I went into work that morning, they sent me to UTRGV to ask the students and the teachers how they were feeling about everything that was going on. I mean, how are you supposed to feel, right? For some people that didn't watch the news that morning, they, social media wasn't what it was in 2001, the way it is today. And so I remember, walking around the campus and getting thoughts and feelings. And it was such an emotional day. And then 4 short days later, we had the bridge collapse on the island. And so I get chills even telling you now. It makes me sad because it was a very weird week, that week that everything happened. And it required things that you don't even know you have instilled in you, resilience, sensitivity, this commitment to just go on and tell people the truth about, the hatred that was going on in our world. And so for me, that was the day, that was the week, that was the month that I knew that storytelling was going to be a part of my life. The end. That's my response. I still do it today. I tell stories of the bank now, and whether it's personal or professional, you know, you're always going to tell stories and tell them in a great way, and tell them from your heart. I enjoyed, you know, holding my kids and making up stories. You know, I didn't tell the average fairy tale of, you know, Cinderella to two boys. You're just telling them nighttime stories about the Power Rangers and going off course and telling your own little stories as you're falling asleep each night. But be a great storyteller. Never miss an opportunity to open with a great story, whether it's at dinner or with your parents. Set the phones down and enjoy each other and tell stories about your lives.
Thank you all for your answers. These are all very interesting to hear. We have one last question before we end the panel. What advice would you give to your younger self when you were just starting out?
I'm going to share the advice that I gave to my daughters when they graduated from 5th grade going into 6th grade. I was able to buy, I have 3 daughters, by the way. And I was able to buy a yearbook with their photos for them. And I put in a quote that I've lived by since I read it. And it was by Jane Fonda. And she said, "We are not meant to be perfect. We are meant to be whole." And if I could have learned that when I was young, that as long as you live in the grace of what Galatians 5:22 and 23 says, the 9 fruitages of the Spirit, then you'll be whole. And you don't have to be perfect. And it's okay to make your mistakes. Just be whole in yourself. That's it.
I would say that the advice that I've been giving a lot lately and that I feel is resonating with me a lot is never compare your journey to anybody else's, because as someone who you know, didn't go and apply for jobs right away after law school, somebody who wasn't a straight A student in law school, so I was very much an average student. It was hard not to compare myself to my classmates and my colleagues who were making really good grades and making a lot of money straight out of law school, and wondering, okay, well, why is none of this happening for me? Why am I not successful? And then, you know, I do feel that in most cases I have surpassed their levels of success, and it just took longer and it was a different path. So even though you're not making, you know, the top grades in your class, even though you don't come from a wealthy family, even though it takes you a little while to build your business, it doesn't mean that you're not going to end up successful. And success is defined differently by everybody. For some people, success is defined by money. For others, it's defined by freedom. For others, it's defined by peace and stability and getting a stable check every other week, you know, having that stable salary. For others, it's starting their own business, not having a stable salary in the beginning, and, you know, eventually growing your business to where, you know, the sky is the limit. Success looks different for everybody, and everybody's path to success looks different. So don't ever get caught up in comparing your journey and your life with somebody else's, because I did that in the beginning and it was a waste of my energy and a waste of my time. And I would honestly not change anything about my life and my journey, and things ended up exactly as they should. And so just trust the process, and things are going to end up exactly as they should for you as well.
I think for myself, you know, speaking to myself as a young person back in the day, I'll be telling myself more, be brave. You know, there's a lot of things that I maybe thought twice about it before doing it, but understanding now where I'm standing, just being brave, you know. Sometimes we don't have the skills, the expectations we're waiting for the right timing, but there's never a right timing. It's about you being brave and believing in yourself. And I remember one time saying to myself, okay, I believe in myself, I have a dream, let's go, you know. And I have been living by it, you know, dream, believe, achieve. And just last year, you know, I had to move about 4 times from different states and one at the beginning of this year. And I told myself, you know what, just be brave. And I see it every day. And I said, go ahead, be brave. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but today you have this opportunity, take it. Right now I'm having my second baby, so sometimes it's hard for me to breathe a little bit here when I'm speaking, and I'm in a different elevation here in Arizona right now. The weather is different too, adjusting to that, but it's always about believing in yourself, you know. 10 years from now, you know, I don't want to be in the same spot I am right now. I want to be better for my second child, you know, for them to have better opportunities, for them to see, you know what, she was brave. Let's be brave together. You know, I want them to understand that we're opening new pathways, new opportunities, like I mentioned, for every state, for every license, to make sure we merge and understand and have the same perspectives. So if it's gonna take me for me to start today to make it work in 10 years, okay, let's be brave, you know, and meet with every board, even if they don't understand or they don't want to meet the requirements. We're trying every day. So it's always about being brave. And that's one thing that I always tell everybody, just be brave. If you need to speak to somebody, find a mentor, find that person that challenges you, but also be brave for yourself and challenge yourself every day.
Advice. For me, I think it's just time. Just you can always make more money along the way in your life, but you can never get back more time. Be intentional about how you spend your time, whether it's work or friendships, relationships, on yourself. Don't be afraid to be alone. Go to a movie, go catch a movie alone if you want. Go do things on your own. I mean, I learned that way later. Like, what am I waiting on? You know, I don't need anyone else. You just need yourself, and be positive. And it's tough some days. You're not always going to have, you know, you're not always going to wake up on, you know, they say the right side of the bed, but get back in bed and jump back out and be positive, because you're not going to get the day back.
Thank you so much. As we close today's panel, I wanted to extend a huge thank you to our incredible speakers, Sarah Hammond, Monica Urena, Leah Wise, and Irma Chapa, for sharing their wisdom and experiences with us. Your stories of resilience are truly inspiring. To everyone here, I hope you feel leaving empowered to break barriers, lift others up, and pursue your passions fearlessly. On behalf of South Texas Frown Upside Down and SheSTEM, which are both female-dominated organizations, thank you for being part of this conversation. Let's continue to support and uplift one another.